it's just a few of us, I had mentioned you could post in the chat, but I think we can just talk. So do you guys have any dashboards that you use on a regular basis right now? It could be at work, it could be on your phone, it could be like a hard good technology, or a hard good meaning like smart technology, or even a thermostat kind of thing. What kind of dashboards are you guys using regularly?
I was gonna say some of the ones I go to the most are like, a lot of financial institutions where they can, view your accounts and kind of get the big picture, like Mint, for example, when I use my personal life. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was gonna say Mint, like Nick. There's a couple with like energy usage, APS, looking at that. And then there are a few at work with different dashboards with products or some of the different performance KPIs and things.
I would say my Fitbit app, or one of my workout apps, normally has a pretty cool dashboard to see what you've done for the day.
Sweet.
Nice. I have to agree with Nick. I think one of the only ones I use is like the Mint app, as well as on my website. I like to go and look and see like if anyone's looking at it, and they have nice like Google Analytics, but yeah.
That's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've been using the like health app recently. All the health statistics. We did like a step challenge, and so that's kind of interesting. So my follow-up question is: anybody currently building, managing, or considering building a dashboard?
Yes, actually, the product that my company is rolling out has a dashboard, and we are constantly having to, or I shouldn't say having to, but we're updating it and changing it as new features and new ways to package our product come out. So we have different tiers of users who have access to different levels of information and different needs. So yeah, we are currently building a dashboard and have one existing, but it's in the state of development.
Great.
Yeah, we're also, we've got our portal and mobile app. We've got all kinds of different dashboards, and we're in the process of designing and building one that will aggregate it and give a better holistic view. And then there's also a departmental one that is being built that, like ours and other products, will roll up into.
That's awesome. Sweet. Well, like Jen said, I'm Jenny Wagner, working at Willis Towers Watson. I'm currently based in Madison. I was living in Arizona for a couple of years, but currently in Madison, but planning on relocating in the near future. So Willis Towers Watson provides software for employees to manage their benefits, such as medical, dental, and vision insurance. And so that is the company that kind of sparked this talk today. We recently were doing a project, kind of starting from the ground up, doing a dashboarding project. So that's what it's based on. But the talk today will primarily be about the process, not so much specifically about our product in general, but you'll see bits and pieces of it. So employee benefits. Wow, I think, so I'm using Google Slides. I think that did that automatically. I guess that's part of I'll have to find these little nuggets when you present, I guess, with templates. So the three things I'll be honing in on: why display data as a dashboard. I'll touch on that really briefly. 2 steps to selecting a dashboarding tool, going kind of through the process I went through to physically pick a tool. And then the third one is designing a series of dashboards to tell a compelling story. And I'll give a lot of tips and tricks that we've learned along the way. So why dashboards? Dashboards allow dense collections of information to be consumed really quickly. It also, the second reason, critical data can be highlighted to make strategic decisions. And the third, users can monitor data visualizations at a glance. So now what? We have this need for a dashboard. We, gathered some data. We think we needed. We have a lot of data. We need to show it to the user. So now what? We got to pick a tool, right? And hopefully, this talk today, it will still be applicable to not just product-driven, consuming or building, but maybe it will be applicable to like analytics and how to arrange an analytics board, etc. So selecting a tool. The first part of selecting a tool is gathering the requirements. We went through an extensive process with product owners, product managers to kind of create this list. And so I wanted to highlight a few that really drove selecting our tool. The first one is it's easy to build. Can you spin up new visualizations really quickly? Can you switch out or move items around using the tool? All those things are good to keep in mind and to kind of hierarchy when selecting a tool. The second one is performant. And I think this one gets missed in all the mess of like when you're looking for a tool to use, it's hard to know what is performant, what's not. And so I'll talk a little bit about that later. Another one, export functionality. How is the user going to consume this information? Consume it, and then what are they going to do with the information? Can the user customize the layout? That was important for this particular project. So we wanted to know, how much could the user customize when they have it in their hands? Is it responsive? I'm going to pause on this one because this is definitely the hot button. Dashboarding tools are pretty terrible at being responsive in nature. And in some sense, for good reason. One of the key things that I've been reading a couple books about dashboards, and they said everything you want to tell a user should be on one screen. The user shouldn't have to interact. They shouldn't have to scroll. They shouldn't have to move around. Well, when you have a screen that's like, a couple inches by a couple inches, how much information can you really get on there? So it's been tricky because although people want to consume the information using mobile devices, dashboards really aren't made for mobile. I think iPads are a better example, but that was a hot topic. And we, in our search, didn't find a lot of tools that did responsive well. There's some that can, but most, it was a challenge. And the last thing to consider is accessibility. Some tools it's getting a lot better in the industry as we were looking at tools, but with how the data is being generated, accessibility is a serious concern. One thing we did research on is that iframes have issues if you're embedding any kinds of dashboards or data into a web-based screen. So that was definitely a concern. So be conscious of that and know kind of where your line is and how accessible your product needs to be. So we took our list of requirements and we kind of went out and we're like, okay, where do we even start? There are so many tools out there. So the first step we did was we looked internally in the Willis Towers Watson group and said, what tools are they using? So some hot ones were Tableau, Power BI, Domo. These were ones that, and Azenda, they kind of bubbled up first. So we looked at them first, but then we went to Google and found a whole bunch more. And so it's really hard to know exactly, how do you navigate this world of like picking a tool? So what we did is we made a matrix of our requirements on the top and then tools on the side. Now, obviously, we don't have time to look at every single tool. So in order to get to what tools we were going to investigate, we followed one simple rule. Did the tool have good documentation from the very beginning? If it has good documentation, you know that there's a lot of support and it has a lot of flexibility. And so we would quick do a Google search, look at how much documentation there was. If it had good documentation, we threw it up on the list. And we had to stop ourselves before we went crazy. So we had, about a dozen here. We then went across and painstakingly, one by one, read up on and did YouTube videos on a whole bunch of these tools. Does it meet our criteria? How accessible is it? Does it have drill downs? How performant is it? That one's a hard one to tell because we couldn't really test it with our data aggregation. So that one's a tough one. We analyzed, was there any costs that were up front that we could see? How was exporting? All these things kind of played into picking a tool. So after doing all that, we narrowed it down to 3 different tools. The first one was Domo, and we heard about it through a different segment in the company. And it's really exciting, very customizable, very user front end friendly. It's a really fun tool. And so we were excited about that one. The second choice was Izenda. They were currently being used in our segment, and they just had a brand new release. And so there was a lot of exciting offerings there, and it definitely met our needs. And then Power BI was a third one, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So who to include when you're searching for a tool? Technology should definitely be involved. They were a huge support and driver of this project, and they can poke a lot of holes in areas that we can't see on the front end, but they can see on the back end. Then obviously product and key decision makers. So once we presented the 3, UX were the primary drivers that did the research and presented the 3 tools. And so we took it to our stakeholders and we did some proof of concepts using all 3 tools as best we could, whether we got a demo site or, some of them. So each one we were able to have direct calls with those individual vendors. And then after calling them, we got pricing, and then we got access to one of the tools. So this is a good example. You'll see this is the design that we proposed on the left, and then we tried to build it in one of the tools on the right, and we got pretty darn close. So that's what we tried to do with each of the products, and then try to see how performant it was. Some additional factors that weighed in. Obviously, UX isn't the only stakeholder, so we had to take these into factor. The one thing is, going into this project, we knew that no tool is perfect and can do everything that we want it to do. It's unfortunate, but it doesn't exist. We had such a unique situation that it's really hard for the. So we were trying to, what do we give and take? So that was one factor. The second thing that weighed heavily is that WTW is a Microsoft first company, which leaned toward preferring Power BI first. So that's why one of the key reasons why they made it on our top 3 list. The third one is, even though certain things weren't on the UX first choice list, it made it onto technologies list or products list. And so those had to be factored in. And then the last thing to consider is that we had to learn to adapt, specifically our design. So we had a design concept done before, but we knew, and we didn't put in too many details because so many things could change based on what tool we were going to pick. So we had to adapt based on that design. We could try to push it, but it was kind of the chicken or the egg thing. Do you do the design first, or do you wait until you pick the tool so that you know what you can design? So the winner is Power BI. Obviously for cost reasons, for being first. And the biggest thing is when we pushed the design, we couldn't prove that Power BI couldn't do something. And so being that it was a Microsoft first product, we were pretty pressed to do it. If we, looking at the other tools, some other downsides, Izenda, we did a proof of concept and we found that they aggregated all their data on the front end, and which would just smash our performance. And so even though Izenda, as we were looking into it, became #1 for designers, once we did our POC, it was out of the game. And then Domo, pricing and complexity of it almost offered too much to the user. And for our audience, it would be overwhelming for them. It's an amazing tool. It's super cool, but it definitely played in a factor. So that kind of concludes our search for a tool. Wanted to pause there. If you guys, what tools you guys are using, and any thoughts on what I've said so far, or any questions?
No, I think it's, so you took the same design and kind of pushed that through 3 different integrations to see if it could replicate what you had hoped for. Yep. Nice.
Yeah, one interesting thing we did find that we had to change our design, like Power BI, for example, couldn't do rounded corners and shadows. If you try it, it's actually pretty funny. It leaves like a little white box around the rounded corners to compensate when you put the shadows on. So we had to change our design and get rid of the shadows so that we could introduce, just leave the rounded corners. So that was a fun thing that we found.
Did you find that most of them had kind of an apples to apples tool set for you to use, or like did some products offer something that would have changed the way you designed it?
Oh, they were actually drastically different. I would say Power BI is the clunkiest of them all. And I say that in terms of like Domo had a cool like drag and drop where it has the grid system. You drag this visual over here and it resorts everything automatically for you, which is really cool. But Power BI does allow you to, size everything and make it great. So the end product did get us to the same place, but how it got there is very different. All right. So the next part is how to tell a story with this data. So we've picked our tool, we have our requirements. So now how do you take data and make it, meaningful? So we stuck to defining our dashboard's goal with, we kept coming back to this. Who will use it? How frequently should the information be updated? What will be monitored? What kind of analytics and like the frequency, they go hand in hand. And then what questions should a dashboard answer? Because if we go back to the definition of a dashboard, they should be able to be alerted of warning items very quickly. And they should be able to monitor things over time and see change over time. And they should be able to consume things over large amounts of data very quickly. So I'm not going to get into the answers for our project of what it is, but this is a good kind of layout to ask these questions when building a dashboard. So we did our research in collecting and organizing our data through interviews, through artifacts. There was a lot of reporting. One of the goals was to get a lot of the reporting material that my company did manually and put it in a dashboard format so that they could have it for monthly, quarterly, annual statements on the fly. So we gathered all the information. we had a lot of data. And so we organized it and did a card sort on it to figure out kind of generally where this made sense. Then we took those concepts and we started throwing some ideas at it. Like there's, just Google searching and looking at competitors at, how did they display certain data points? What was meaningful to other people? How do we make something unique? Not for the sake of making it unique, but, does a standard bar chart share what we needed it to share? And then sometimes we said, no, like you can see one example here. We found there was a cool visualization with Google Flights. When you go and you want to compare, if I leave this day, but then come home this day, you can compare your different flight costs. And we were able to kind of concept something like that as an idea. So when choosing the right visuals, there's a couple things to keep in mind. This is a really great way to break down. I think this is my weak point. You have this idea, someone comes to you, says, hey, I need a way to see how many site visits there are. Okay, great. There's so many ways to display that, Do you display it with a bar chart, a line chart? So here's a couple tips when to use the certain visuals. First one, column, bars, and lines, they emphasize values for comparisons. So on the left, you'll notice that their line charts and bar charts are better used for static data, whereas line charts are better over time. Pie, trees, and stacked, they are good for seeing parts of a whole. So pie charts and tree maps, they're good for static data, whereas stacked column charts are better to compare over time. Another one is scatter, bubble, and network. These are really good for seeing relationships, specifically static relationships. And then finally, another example, so scatter, histogram, and bell charts, they're good for seeing static data distribution. Any questions or thoughts here in terms of picking the right chart? This is definitely a tricky one. So I will send you guys, there's a cheat sheet. This guy, Taras B, he wrote a Medium article and he put all these charts in like one cool grid. And so it's like a cheat sheet. So I'd be happy to send it to you guys to take a quick peek as you guys are thinking of visuals.
That'd be great.
Yeah. So then now that we know we have our data, we know what kind of chart we're going to build, but now what is it going to look like? So I want to give you guys some kind of do's and don'ts that I've learned through my research, how to share those visuals. The first one is to display an adequate level of data. The level of depth depends on the dashboard's goal. So this one's not a hard and fast rule, but be conscious as you're putting visuals on a dashboard. Is it too high level or is it too in depth? Think of a car dashboard. What certain things did they bring to the front? They brought, obviously you need to know your gas and you need to know your current mileage, like your current speed. But do you need to know how many miles have been on this recent trip? Not necessarily. So be conscious of where it sits in the level of on your dashboard. Another one is to eliminate unnecessary noise. De-emphasize non-data content. This really helps your eye go to the content and not be lost around the data. Remember, the whole point of a dashboard is for someone to quickly consume information. And so trying to eliminate the background and non-data will be really helpful. Another good example of this is how you use color. This one I see a lot for like bar charts, for example, using the different colors for the sake of using colors, it can be distracting if it's not meaningful. If it's not denoting any different type of information, keep it simple so that what's really coming to life is that you see, January was 45, which is much higher than something else. Another one is arrange information strategically, sort data in like categories. This one was kind of a fun one to research and learn a little bit more about. So I'll kind of break down the one on the left. So the one on the left, you'll notice that the organization is pretty poor. It's not alphabetical, and it doesn't show, this is grades versus late assignments over time, but there's no real order. And so it's really hard for a user to make an actionable step going forward. So you'll notice that the sort order is off. Also, it's pretty hard to compare one visualization to another in a quick manner. And then the third point is, there's that red indicator dot, and you kind of have to search for it in order to know, oh, that's a problem area and that's a problem area. If you look at the example on the right, you'll see right away that it's sorted from lowest grade to highest grade so that the user knows right away on the top, here's some students that are of concern. You can also compare really quickly the grade value that there's a couple A students versus the other students in a quick manner to kind of know and gauge where in context where it's at. So this one has been a pretty interesting one to consider as, there's a lot of pieces of data on this screen. And so how do you organize it in a strategic way? Another way is highlight with purpose. We've kind of already talked about color, but making marks of distinction are also important. You'll notice on the left, there's a lot of color and your eye immediately goes to the big bars of color, where in actuality, you want to know what's the problem data, which is profit and on delivery time. So if you see the items on the right, the profit and on delivery time have a quick and small marker with red to note that that's what you should be looking at first, and then look at the data in a little bit more detail. The final example I have is apply just general design standards. Obviously, I'm not going to go into design methodology, but there's some basic things such as white space, hierarchy, and accessibility. So the example on the left, clearly there's not enough white space. Things are jammed together. It's hard to distinguish one chart from another. The hierarchy, like everything is pretty much on the same level, and it's hard to know where the header is from where the content is. The item on the right, it notes it has a lot more white space. You'll see there's consistency. It's a lot easier to consume and read in a quick and concise manner. I'm not going to touch too much on accessibility, but again, it's something to look into when picking a tool. To look into, most tools have a page that describes what their accessibility level is, and so you can match it with the criteria that your project needs. Any questions on the do's and don'ts, or one that you wanted to look back on? Scan through those one more time. Great. So the last piece of telling a story is the general layout. Similar to reading and a lot of design, people read from top to bottom, left to right. So when you want to organize your information, typically you want the most important on the top left. And to continue, as you see the darker pieces in this illustration, the top row is going to be the most important, whereas the bottom is less important. When building consistent blocks, so another way that you can direct and encourage the user's eye to hone in on certain pieces of data is to kind of wipe out all the other noise that could possibly be there. So building consistent blocks, it helps focus the user by not distracting them with different formats, different scales, different size. Not saying that we can't have, you know, this one's taller than this one, but there's been some pretty crazy examples out there where every single tile has a different color behind it, and you don't know where to look first, on top of the fact that you're just trying to read the data. So building consistent blocks really helps tell us a more clear story that directs them to the data. The next one is to sketch it out. I know as designers, we really hate this part. We all want to just go ahead and design the most amazing, beautiful thing out there. But don't jump ahead. I think a couple points I alluded to before, you know, the cart and the horse before picking a tool. You never know what the limitations of your tool are before you get to it. And so having a framework helps kind of direct picking the tool, which is great, and doing wireframes. But filling in the details, obviously, you're going to save yourself a lot of time. We did a kind of an interesting study. We, for the first time, did a, we called it a design stakeholder group. And so it was a group of individuals that were not designers and were pretty high level decision makers. And so we presented them with a couple different options, and we had them on their own make comments of what they liked, what they didn't like, and we educated them on specifics. And we took that feedback and we created the product we have today. So putting it all together, here is the final product that we came up with. We have limited data. I'll kind of break down the principles that we apply here. So we have limited data, which directs the user to those individual things. And then the user can also click on the data to learn more, to understand at a deeper level. This particular dashboard, you can click and interact with the different pieces. I will note that you can see the filters or slicers at the top of the screen. That was not in our original design, but that is a key way that Power BI filters different data pieces. And so we added that into the design later on and kind of incorporated it in. We tried our best to combine things like items, key things you'll notice. So we put on the top left, we put the map, and the map kind of trickles down to tell the user that these types of employees and participants enrolling in their benefits are from this particular region, and it goes down from there. We picked again, this is just one example, and we have many more data points to go, but I had mentioned about, you know, which tool do you choose, or which visualization do you choose for what? So the employee status, it is a picture of the whole. So we were very intentional about that, you know, how many employees are active, how many employees are retirees. And then the average salary by age. We did want to know the information. It's static information, but or excuse me, it varies over time, which then helps the user understand how do we change different types of plans based on the age of the participants involved. So taking those design principles, being able to tell a unique story, we feel like we put together through our research a very successful product. We start building it. We haven't actually built it yet. We start building it this month. So this is a fresh new product that's hot off the press that you guys get a little sample of. So that is all I have for you guys today. But I'm open to any thoughts, comments, or questions. Oh, I did want to also point out, these are some great reads. I will post this link in the chat. This one has the quick cheat sheet of when to use the different visuals, but also information dashboard design. The visuals in there are hilarious because they're very old, but the content is solid. And then storytelling with data. These are great books to look into. That's all I got.
Thanks, Jenny. That was awesome. Really informative and easy to follow.
Oh, good. That's great. I'm gonna quick post this here. Let's see if I can do that.
Were all your what not to do examples just what the dev team gave you, and then you just took that
Right?
and said, okay.
A lot of those are actually driven from the book, but I remade them because the book had like 50 million examples, and I was like, you can't read this, so we're gonna do like 3.
I'm a big fan of those little micro charts, the lines that show, just a day's progress or a week's progress without any other scale. I think it's really powerful. We see it a lot in like, stocks and weather trends and stuff.
Those are, the name just slipped my mind. I can't remember. Sorry. I had it a second ago. Spark charts, spark lines.
Spark lines. Okay.
Yep. Well, I hope you guys learned something, and I hope you guys, it's applicable. I don't know if I see that there's chats in here, but I cannot open them.
So they're thanking you for a great presentation.
Oh, thanks. Do you guys have any questions for your specific projects or any other resources I can point you to?
This isn't specific to my product or anything, so I'm not working on a dashboard, but I was kind of curious because you said, you gave kind of all the examples of the different charts you can use for different circumstances and things. So how did you guys kind of narrow down what was going to be best for your specific product?
Yeah, we have a lot of data. And so kind of looking at that cheat sheet, being able to kind of narrow it down, and it's tough because there's a lot of gray lines. But what we kept finding, a rule of thumb we kept finding is, we have a lot of data here, and how do you break it down? How do you break it down to the smallest level of information that's meaningful? And then being able to present it, like some of them, for example, how many employees are enrolled? Really, what is the story we're trying to tell behind that? Well, what % of people are enrolled in such and such plan or are active participants? And we want that information quickly. So a pie chart was kind of a no-brainer there. But it does take a lot of time with like 60 data points and having to think through every single one of those. It's a process. It takes a lot more design than just like, oh, let's slap it in there. Yeah,
I'd be interested to see like the comparison, between if you decide to do it as a pie chart versus like a bar chart, how people respond to it. But you did a really awesome job. I liked how you took us through the whole story. It was awesome. Thanks, Jenny.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Let me see. I'm trying to get, I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second so I can get that link to you guys. I post it here.
Obviously, I'm not on the technical end of dashboard creation, but is it are you pulling all your data from a single source database, or are you bringing in like, oh, I've got information on Amazon and I've got information on Stripe, and they all have to talk to, the software that you're using to create the dashboard?
So we're pretty fortunate. All of our data is aggregated in one data source, one SQL server. We do have to work with architecture. That's the first step, is to refactor a lot of the data so that it can be pulled in properly. One thing that's cool about our dashboard is that it all integrates with each other. So when you click on one data point, everything will filter and aggregate the similar way around it. But it only works that way if your data is set up properly. So that will be kind of our first task, which is a lot of work to get that set up from the beginning. I was trying to think of any other technology, Power BI things. I know Margaret at Innate, they're using Power BI for some of the products there. And there's definitely roadblocks. Sometimes the data doesn't come in properly, or there's a lot of manual process, but they have come, the last 3 years that I've used Power BI in the past, they've come a long way. So keeping in the loop with the different products as they come out is key too, which is hard to do because there's so many tools, but there's a lot of new stuff coming out, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's good. I remember Power BI from Innate, and Mike was a huge user of it at that time.
Yeah. I don't know if you use Azure. Azure has an out-of-the-box tool, which can be really cool, but even just organizing Azure, like DevOps, it makes a big difference, and it can be meaningful for a team to create actions on stories or features. So knowing those tips and tricks are really helpful.
One of the questions I do have is, from what I remember designing dashboards, is the Power BI customizable by the end user? I remember that being a huge issue is when we as the company decided what the dashboard was going to look like. Most people did not find it helpful because they wanted to see different things. So customizing it to their needs was a huge win for them.
Yeah, so that's a great question. They, out of the box, do not allow users to customize the data, but Power BI just in March launched a new source called the Playground, which is an open source GitHub resource, and one of the approved developers did build a plugin to allow limited organization and customization of dashboards. So it is available now through a plugin.
That's nice.
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. They also just put out custom branding so that the user could customize their branding with a click of a button. But with everything you customize, I mean, a user could break. And one of the use cases for our users is it had to be simple, because most of them were at a VP level or very high leadership. And so it needed to be simple, but it needed to be relative to them and that group. So we will offer customization at a very limited level. And so Power BI was a good choice there. But if you want really good customization, Domo is the way to go. It's a cool tool.
Jenny's a Domo fan.
I know. I want it for myself. It's just so cool. I wish my demo ran out of time, but I wish I could give you a sneak peek, but it's all done. So you'll have to check it out for yourself.
Thank you.
Well, I really appreciate you guys joining. I had a lot of fun digging into the research, and feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn with any further questions. Happy to be accessible and a resource to you.
Awesome. Great job, Jenny.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Good to see you guys.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.